Sounds good. Hey everyone, welcome to the September 30th, 2021 Helm Dev Call. I'm your host this week, Scott Rigby, and we have a lovely cast of characters joining us today. Mostly the normal folks. Um, Hi everyone else. Cool. Okay, so I'm just going to paste this announcement super quickly. And then, yeah, Bridget, do you want to go ahead and start off with the announcements that you added?
Yeah, absolutely. So we needed folks to host the KubeCon online office hours. One is Tuesday, October 12th, 9 a.m. Pacific, and the other one is Friday, October 15th, 10:30 a.m. Pacific. So I'm going to carry on a discussion in the chat with folks who might want to sign up for that, or you can comment in the doc. But you need to get allow listed in Bevy, which is something Karen can connect you to CNCF on. But this is usually, it's a good way to participate if you're not going to be, and you will be able to do Tuesday, Farina. That's fantastic. I will make a note of that. But yeah, we just, because the people who are on site are probably going to have bad network connectivity and trouble doing that. So yeah, that'll be very important. And then I'll just roll into my other question, which is I looked at the calendar, and unless I read it wrong, the 3.7.1 patch release would theoretically be the week of KubeCon. And I guess I'm looking at Mr. Farina, who's nodding, to see if there's any change warranted due to that.
So normally we'd have a bunch of people on site at KubeCon, and that would become our problem for releasing that day, a patch release. We're not going to have, we're going to have a bunch of people who are not on site. And so I think we can still do that patch release for 3.7.1. I'll be able to cut it if we have things to put in it. Right now we have 0 things in it. But there was at least one thing I know that folks wanted to put into it. So we'll have to wait and see what we get and what goes in there. In fact, I'm going to go track that person down and ask.
Okay, awesome. And then the only other KubeCon related reminder I had is, remember, we're not having this call the week of KubeCon, but we are having those other sessions. And we'll make sure there's links in here to the in the doc to those other sessions. Back to you, Scott.
Great. Yeah, so I think the only other I wanted to just make it. It's not a giant announcement, but I had asked other Helm maintainers if they wanted to help do a feature showcase for Helm for Cloud Native at Scale. The San Francisco Kubernetes meetup is pairing up different open source technologies within CNCF and different CNCF projects to show interoperability or whatever. And so they're doing that with Helm and Flux next. Anyway, on the 5th, next Tuesday possibly. Anyway, yeah, so I put the information on that, and I put a little tweet that makes it very clear that you'll. Now, folks on this call, it's not going to be a big surprise, but for others, they will get a preview of my fancy mullet and beard. Anyway, so yeah, so Helm feature showcase and another related project. Okay, discussion topic. Farina, you're up.
Yeah, okay. I do remember here for the discussion topic. This was more going to let you know. The Artifact Hub folks, unless somebody sees an issue with it, so they do on Artifact Hub, you can prove certain things, right? You can say, hey, I own this repository. There's certain things around ownership that can be validated there. And with something like a chart repository, it's fairly easy to do that because you can drop another file in the base of your repository to prove your ownership, right? With an OCI repository, you can't just drop an arbitrary file in. So they've worked it out so that way it is now uploading an arbitrary artifact, or an artifact for Artifact Hub in that same repository that they can read, right? Because you essentially have a bunch of blobs in there. They've now got their own information they're putting in there that contains the metadata for validation. If anybody sees an issue with that, they're asking anyone to speak up, but that's kind of how they've implemented it in order to do some of those ownership features, stuff like that. By the way, if you have repositories up on Artifact Hub, I would ask you if you own or you are the vendor or something around there, or you want to be official, that's all possible. I would take advantage of that.
Could I just, sorry that I didn't quite get what was new in that, Matt. I know that there was already an Artifact Hub metadata file. I must have just
that
missed.
works in a Helm repository. So if you've got it in S3 or on GitHub, right? But if you stick it in an OCI registry, that file, how do you stick it in there?
Yes, got it.
So that's what they're doing. They're inserting it as an additional layer in there that's not used, just like other things. Like we can stick a provenance file alongside of the chart itself. They're sticking their thing in there now alongside of it.
So question, I was on Artifact Hub and noticing that there's like tickies for verified. And is that different? Like, can you talk a little bit about validation versus verification?
Sure.
And how people interact with that?
Sure. Let me pull it up. So I can drop
I think
a link
these are
in here.
different things, but I want to make sure it's clear.
There are different things. There are different things, and I'm looking for the, all right. So I'll drop it into, here's a link to the docs because everything is really well documented in Artifact Hub. You'll see the different kinds of things, and underneath that, you'll see there is a verified publisher, official status, ownership, things like that. So a verified publisher, that the person who listed it on Artifact Hub has control over the repository. Okay, that's the basic thing. So that way you're not listing somebody else's repository. And I'll tell you, when we had deprecated the stable and incubator repositories, we removed them from Artifact Hub at one point, and other people started trying to add them back to make them searchable under their own names, right? Because you can add any chart repository. And a verified one is one that you prove that you own control of as the owner. This is important for businesses, things like this. You want to verify that your presence in both places is the same. An official one means that you own the software that's being deployed. So take somebody like Bitnami deploying WordPress. That's not going to be official because they're not doing it. But then take somebody like Nextcloud, who is also listing Nextcloud on there. And so if it's the Nextcloud organization who develops it, putting it on there, that would be official status because you're officially the same one. It would be like if Oracle put a MySQL chart up there, right? Or a MySQL operator, they could be labeled as the official one because it's the one coming from the organization doing it. That's the big thing there.
Well, thanks.
Okay. Thanks for adding that Twitter link. Okay, so then, Bridget, did you want to talk about the repo?
Oh, I went back and found that there was a doc I started back in April about inactive repo cleanup stuff. So I think everyone is tired of hearing about this, but I'm going to keep asking until we either change the master branch to main on these or
let's start with doing one
used.
at a time. Yeah, let's start with one at a time. The storing the logs one, that very first one, it went in it running of it stopped working a while ago. There was a bug in Kubernetes that stopped the logs from being recorded, and we didn't notice for a while, and nobody noticed because nobody looks at the logs. So I think we can actually archive this one, but it was used over with the charts folks. So I think we need to run it by that team first. So while we're in the background here, I will take the action to go into my overclocked mail because I sent GitHub notifications to my mail. Bad idea. And send out an email to the charts folks about this. Okay.
Awesome. And then I had a couple of other ones that I listed on there as well. I'm just kind of bringing them to attention. If we care about repo audit or specs, which appear to be repos that were set up and then nothing ever happened with them. Looks
So
like
yeah,
Brand and
Repo Audit
Scott are
was
the only people. Yeah.
Yeah. So Repo Audit was originally a tool that would let you point it at a Helm repository and then audit it and provide features. It was one of those things we wanted to do and then kind of fizzled out due to lack of time. Specs was a request we had a while ago to document the Helm repository and chart specs because they're mostly done through implementation and people wanted to understand that. I think we still need to document specs, right? I think that's really useful for testing and looking at things, having our implementation be the only way, especially as we go into Helm 4. It's hard to tell if we broke something, right? Besides testing and hoping our tests don't do it. And so we should have a specs thing. I'm not sure what we want to do about Repo Audit, if we want to pick that one back up or not, because I still think it's a good idea for somebody to do. And I'll tell you, Artifact Hub has come up with a way to audit their stuff in a Helm repository. And I think that idea is pretty useful.
What would be the scope of the audit? I mean, what was the initial idea for the scope?
Well, if you look at it, if I remember right, it's been a while since I looked at the code. It'll look at things and it can keep a cache and it can tell you if things like your digest is changing. So the way you're building things ends up rebuilding and changing digests over time for the same version. It'll catch stuff like that. It could be built to catch certain useful information. Let me pull up what the goal was.
So the scope was basically security based type of thing, or?
It could be used for various things. So here's what we were looking at. Check if the digest for a version change over time. An email a report on it. We wanted to check if the newly released charts since the last run match their digest. So that's a security one, right?
Security one.
Check if all charts match their digest, right? Not just the last run. Again, a security one, making sure. Check and report which charts have provenance files. Check the new chart version since the last run against their provenance file and make sure the signing and verification works, right? Check all chart versions against provenance files. You're seeing a thing here. Fire a webhook off on completion for an audit and audit the metadata in the charts. But we didn't have a plan for how we'd want to audit the metadata, just to see whether you wanted to catch anything in there, or if you look at our testing tool for linting, right? Our chart linter, our chart testing tool. That's the name of it. We have the ability to pass in configuration and audit some of that metadata to have the same thing that you could do in a repository. And a lot of this is security related, which I thought would be useful at the time.
Yeah, this sounds interesting to me. So I'll take a look at. Do you remember who owned that exercise? Was it a group specifically, or?
It's the charts team. You'll see my name and Scott's on it, but I think I did all of the coding on it. So if you want to talk about it, I'm happy to.
All right, thanks, Mike.
I believe my name's on it only because I did something like added
code of conduct.
Code of, yeah, that was it. Yeah, something necessary, right? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so my question came up because I was noticing these hadn't moved in years. And so I wanted to make sure that we either updated the, master branch to main and made any other or owners file updates, anything that needed to be updated in them, or archived them, one or the other, but I didn't want to leave stuff sitting there untouched for years as some sort of fossil.
Yeah, let me see. So to close this, because it's a source repo, we'll have to check with the project involved and the org maintainers. So for the first one, the log one, the Quay logs, I think we can just archive that, but I've got to run it by both teams. I'll do them both in lazy consensus. It sounds like we've got somebody interested in Repo Audit. And I think before we do major changes in Helm 4, we do need to do spec stuff, at least at the very basics. So that way we make sure we don't break something in Helm 4. I think that's important.
Awesome. Do you want to take on the task of changing the master branch to main and the two that we're keeping then?
Sure.
Oh, did you see? Sorry, I'm just catching up on the chat. Did you see Paul's note, Farina? Since Paul and I are both on the charts team, can we just say just archive it as reps from charts? Or I guess there's a wider group of people there we probably want.
There's a wider group of people.
Yeah.
We need, I will send out a lazy consensus message,
Yeah.
and then I'll make sure that the org maintainers are also looped in, because to archive something, we got to loop them in, if I remember the governance right. So I'll chase that down for the first one. I'll do that in the background here once I'm done talking.
Okay. All right. So Bridget, I think you're. Oh, actually, sorry.
No, I'm not sure. Like, yeah, I'm not sure this one is on topic for the folks that are on this call. Basically, I noticed that we had some ongoing questions about breaking changes, but they don't count as breaking changes when stuff's behind an experimental flag. But like, do we know what we want to do in that particular case? And I think maybe that's a question for the wider community. Yeah, so I'll defer that one. You had one
and
you
I
were
think we're going to
adding.
have a talk on the issue, because
Yeah.
Because OCI media type is not, because it's experimental, it's
Right.
not a breaking change. People have been using the experiment as if it is production ready, and we have labeled it, we put it behind a flag, we have said it's experiment. And so now it's how do we work with the community on it? As I think I said last week, I think this proves that experiments have failed, because people use experiments as if they're official, and we should do everything as a plugin in the future. So that's my 2 cents, and somebody will have to convince me otherwise.
And then you can fold in plugins if you want to. Basically, after acceptance, is that like, or everything is a plugin, stays plugin?
You can fold in plugins as commands eventually.
Okay.
We've done that in the past. It's going to depend on contribution and license, whether it functionally needs to be rewritten, but the ability to pull that code into a command has happened in the past. And some of the Helm commands you have today started their life as a
The
plugin.
plugin. All right. Yeah, sounds like a nice life cycle though.
Yeah,
and that's a way to experiment as well.
It does make sense. That does make sense to me too, Farina. And also, I know we had an outstanding item in the past to to connect on some potential ways to allow users of the SDK to access OCI code. And so perhaps, do you think that's something I know KubeCon is coming up and we're all super busy for that, but Matt, do you think that's something that you would still like to connect with me on?
Hold on, what was that again? The
Yeah, we had an item from some weeks or more back about connecting together about users of the Helm SDK who want to take advantage of the experimental OCI feature. Is that
yeah,
something you would like to connect with me on? I would like to.
I think, yeah, I think we need to figure out our plan around when we could take this GA or not, because that'll impact when it gets moved out of the experimental, out of the internal. So we need to figure that out, because that'll inform our conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, we can just start up a repo for the time. Yeah. So let's try and chase down what that criteria would be, because that'll inform what we want to do. Yeah, let's do that.
Exactly. Sounds good. Okay. Thanks for that, Bridget. Okay, I guess the next item is mine, which is pretty. I just saw your note, Bridget. Well, I was just gonna say, based on what you had noted before, that there was a vote that I believe already happened, but for yours truly, to help out with the Helm project, mainly for SDK reasons, is what I noted, but otherwise too. And Butcher had mentioned something about saying that according to our governance that it should be done in a separate mailing list, but that actually isn't in our governance. So I was wondering, should we update that? And you had said you did make a
Oh, I have a different PR open about governance, but if we're
yes.
doing a wholesale governance update, perhaps I should try to get that, because every governance update, we need to get people to come vote on it. So if we have two semi-related items, clarifying and tightening things around governance, maybe we want to collapse them into, hey, please come look at this governance update.
Yeah, one email or something. That makes sense. Yeah, and I already gave my thumbs up to that one. It seems pretty straightforward to me, your PR. But yeah, so if anyone else, on the call wants to take a look at that, please do. And I guess my question was, does anyone? I was going to go ahead and make a PR, but then that seemed pretty self-serving in that moment. So I just figured, does anyone else want to make that? It seems like a fairly simple one. I'll be happy to also talk it out with anyone if they want to do it. I think it's just as simple as it could be, just as simple as saying on the line where in governance where it says that that new members may be added by a majority vote of the maintainers, it could just simply say on the private maintainers mailing list or something like that. At least
Yeah,
Farina, that's
I
how
can put in a PR about that and then spend my time getting people to click a lot of clickies. That's fine.
Okay, that'd be awesome. Yeah, and I'm mentioning your name, Farina, only because Butcher in the on the email list, on the Helm email list, said that you and he had discussed it. So
Yeah. He
if
came
that
and
sounds
poked
good
me
to
on
you-
it, and we went and read through the governance to see what's the appropriate list and where it needs to happen at. And that's when we realized there was no appropriate list said anywhere for it. Of course, you're not on some of the lists, so you can't self-nominate on those lists. So you'd have to self-nominate elsewhere. But yeah.
Yeah. So, but does that sound like a good thing for if Bridget wanted to add that line in the governance in the PR to update governance, or do you think we should talk about it more?
So
Or
yeah, I mean, well, I haven't thought about it too much. So I just thinking off the top of my head, you would need to self-nominate on the public mailing list because you don't have access to the internal mailing lists. And I would suggest that the vote probably needs to take place on the appropriate internal mailing list in case there's discussion around it that needs to happen. So
exactly, I did it,
and that's what I would suggest.
I thought so too, and that's why I self-nominated on the public one, even though I have access to, since I'm also on the governance team, but just not on the Helm team. So I thought that seemed like the best way to go. Okay, cool. Then I suppose, does anyone else have any other topics that they wanted to bring up, or do we just go to assignments for next week? Looks like assignments. Okay, let me grab. Oh, it looks like you're doing it. Thanks, Bridget. Wow. Anybody want to volunteer to moderate next week, or do notes, or do issue triage?
I'll take issue triage on.
Cool. I think I can do notes next week.
I'll moderate if I can't get Karina to do it.
I'm checking my calendar to see if I can do it. Put my name in just in case, and then if I can't, I'll switch it with your name. Sweet, thanks.
Cool.
Good
Well, bless
fun.
you all. You are all awesome and lovely, and we get 4 minutes of our lives back. I'll see you all soon. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.